Okay, so it seems like everybody's in the room that's coming.
Okay. So welcome, everybody, and thanks for joining us. I'm Barb McQuarrie, and I'm the Community Director at the Center for Research and Education and Violence Against Women and Children. And I'll let Margaret introduce herself.
I'm Margaret McPherson. I'm a research associate at the center and Barb's traveling companion.
So we've been working on the Neighbours, Friends and Families campaign for a very long time. And we really thought that International Women's Day was a really good chance to go back to those still very important core messages of the campaign. So that's what we're going to be sharing with you today. We're going to take you through the journey of Neighbours, Friends and Families. We're going to look at how the Ontario Domestic Violence Death Review Committee research has really influenced the development of this campaign and continues to influence our work. We're going to talk about the importance of grassroots leadership. And of course, our project is to teach everybody. So this is not a campaign for professionals. This is a campaign for absolutely everyone. And we've got some exciting new videos to share with you. So where we started was, as I mentioned, really with research that comes out of the Domestic Violence Death Review Committee. And we know from the work done there that, and we knew this early on, and from the very first reviews, what we were seeing is that it's not that people didn't know that something was wrong. They knew that something was going on. They either didn't realize that it was a problem or they didn't know what to do about it. So we're going to show you a short video of some of the people from those early days that kind of summarize those learnings.
We can point to almost every case and find that somebody knew something, but they didn't understand the significance of it, and they didn't understand what to do about it once they did appreciate that there is a risk for violence.
But most of the cases that we see, most of the tragedies, the key people are right there beside the victim. They're friends, family, co-workers, neighbors, who often, as Al says, have a lot of information.
We found that in the majority of the cases that there were in excess of 10 risk factors, most of which could have been known by family or friends or co-workers, that had they understood what those factors meant or what those incidents meant, then they might have been able to, one, inform the person who became the victim of the violence, or in fact the perpetrator of the violence, to try to have intervened and deflected, as Peter has said, even taking the step of calling the police.
And so we started with the evidence, and then there was leadership in the community about how are we going to respond. And so in early 2003, I think, to 2004 or 5, Neighbour to Neighbour was a little local project in London, a campaign that was started, I think, in the States, in San Francisco, that they picked up and adapted for a local community to build on this idea about how are we actually going to engage everyone in this issue and what do they need to know. And over the course of the next couple of years, the Liberal government came into power, and they made domestic violence a priority issue. And Neighbours, Friends and Families evolved out of the Neighbour to Neighbour to work to become a provincial campaign. And so there was an expert panel that was convened. So this is a picture of some of the people that were involved in those early days. Sandra Pupatello is also there. And the community launches that started taking place around the province, engaging people, inviting them to come and to talk about what was happening in the community. And cake was always a good idea. It's always a good idea to have cake at your community events. But they were quite successful in the sense that it started a conversation in Ontario that we badly needed to have.
Can I just add the important The really important thing about the expert panel that designed the campaign is that it was very interdisciplinary in nature. And so you had police officers, you had shelter workers, you had a partner assault response program worker, you had researchers, you had people who had worked in the field for police. I don't know if I said that. Worked in the field for a very long time, but who came at this issue and this problem from many different perspectives.
Indeed. And out of the expert panel, sort of the Neighbours, Friends and Families information was developed. And it was groundbreaking in the sense that it referred explicitly to woman abuse. It took a bystander approach in thinking about what Neighbours, Friends and Families need in order to keep people safe and to act on warning signs. The brochure about how to talk to the person who's committing the violence, and it was all grounded in the community work.
So as you can see from the brochures, this campaign started really specifically talking about woman abuse, and that was quite progressive at the time, where we were really recognizing the gendered nature of this problem. And that has not changed. Women are still at the highest risk of domestic violence, sexual assault, even sexual harassment. And women are more, we know women are more likely to have serious injuries, and more likely to be hospitalized, more likely to feel fear for their lives. But that picture of it being a problem that happens primarily to women has changed. It's not that we're denying that it primarily happens to women, it's that we're also broadening our gender analysis. And so we have just emerging research that looks at LGBT communities, and we see that domestic violence is often higher in those communities than it is in heterosexual relationships. And we also have just very, very emerging research on trans people. And every indication is that they experience domestic violence as they do other forms of violence at astronomically high rates. And so very, very, very high rates. And so what that's mean is that we've had to go back to a more gender inclusive lens on this work. We've had to include the fact that men can be victims, certainly that gender non-binary people, that trans people have high risk as well. And so it's a constantly evolving understanding of the problem. So while we know still women, very, very high risk, we've broadened our gender analysis to include all genders. And then we know that when we apply an intersectional analysis, that not all groups have equal risk. And so there are many, many factors that can contribute to being more at risk of domestic violence, that can contribute to experiencing more barriers to receiving any kind of support or service. It could be racism, it could be ableism, it could be poverty, it could be language barriers, and many more, ageism as well. And so we need to recognize that a sort of a one-size approach to support and even communication doesn't work. We have to recognize the very specific circumstances and barriers that each community faces. So that's a big part of the reason why the Neighbours, Friends and Families campaign has generated all of these different spin-offs. So while we started with our core Neighbours, Friends and Families campaign, we now have Neighbours, Friends and Families for immigrant and refugee communities. We have a Francophone campaign, Voisins, Amis, Famille. We have Ganawaytuin, which is an Aboriginal recreation of the Neighbours, Friends and Families campaign. We have Make It Our Business, which focuses on domestic violence in the workplace. We have It's Not Right, which Margaret has been really key in developing, which is a campaign recognizing the sorts of abuse that older adults face. And then Cut It Out is our campaign that focuses on salon professionals. So what's core to all of those campaigns is that what we want to do is teach everybody to recognize warning signs, signs of high risk. We want to teach them how to respond safely, effectively, and then to refer on to sources of support.
And so that's a little bit of the history of where we've been. And we know that, the need for neighbors, friends, and families never goes away. So these are statistics from the Death Review report in December 2019. And, it's a journey. It's a long road that we're on. We make progress, we learn things, we work together, and we have to continue to work. So I just wanted to take a minute. This is Angie Marks. She's the executive director at the shelter in Sarnia, and they've had 3 murders there in the past since December. And so she had a few words that she wanted to offer today.
Hi, my name is Angie Marks. I'm the executive director at the Women's Interval Home and Sexual Assault Survivor Center. So following the murders and the constant bad news that we were experiencing in our media, what I found is a community that not only mourned together, but really struggled with understanding what happened. The number one question that we were getting on our crisis line as people asking the question, could I have done something differently? And the fact that people are reaching out and trying to get the information they need is part of our preventative work that needs to be an ongoing piece in our community, so people have that information prior to something that's happening. And we are so thankful that we have the resources to share with our community, neighbors, friends, and family. Neighbors, friends, and family have a huge amount of resources that we were able to provide to survivors' families who are experiencing survivors' grief, but also to our community to continue to act in the prevention of domestic violence moving forward, to support and understand red flags early on, and to be able to know where to refer people when they need support and assistance, should they feel or are questioning whether a family or friend is experiencing domestic violence.
So in this message, we have some key messages, and they're very simple. The first, and maybe the most important one, is everyone has a role to play. So one of our new videos, it's really just about this key message.
Ending domestic violence is a powerful idea, and it will take each and every one of us. We create society together. When you support a neighbor, friend, or family member who is experiencing violence at home, you contribute to a supportive community. It counts. Your support says, I see what is happening. I am concerned. It's not your fault. I believe you. You don't have to be alone. I am here for you. Even small actions can have a big impact, especially when the person you are supporting is isolated, hurt, and afraid. Just showing your concern helps to reduce the stigma. It says you are part of our community, and this impacts all of us. It's up to you. What role do you want to play?
So that little video is on the Neighbors, Friends, and Families website. We will post a link in the chat. And all of the videos you see today will be available for you to share and to use in your own education and prevention efforts.
So recognizing warning signs is, of course, fundamental to the work, and goes back to the original brochures, understanding what people who are experiencing domestic violence, what their experience may look like, and then also what abusive and controlling behavior looks like. I think that we have to take every opportunity to help people understand that violence in relationships in any form is unacceptable, and that we really do have to change the way we think about it and the conversations that we're having, and to find the courage to overcome our hesitation to support the people around us.
So another one of our key messages, and this one is important, is that small actions can make a big difference. We're not asking anybody to solve somebody else's relationship difficulties. We're saying that really small actions, paying attention, showing care, showing concern can make all the difference. So we're going to show you our next little video now, which does focus on warning signs.
When it comes to ending domestic violence, we all have a role to play. It's not about being a hero. You just have to pay attention. Pay attention to the people you care about. When you do, you might notice warning signs. Does the person you care about seem sad, lonely, and afraid? Are they nervous talking when their partner is around? Do they make last-minute excuses about why they can't meet you? Are they sick and missing work more often? Are they using drugs or alcohol to cope with their situation? Are they trying to hide or make excuses for bruises or injuries? Being isolated and being controlled, those are two big warning signs. When you see something or hear something that makes you uncomfortable, don't judge. Wait for a quiet moment alone with the person you are worried about. Say, "Hey, the other day I saw what happened. Are you okay?" And then listen.
And so when we first started working with Neighbors, Friends, and Families, what we heard a lot was people asking for, what should I say? How can I have this conversation? And so we broke it into this little framework that we call the SYNC IT framework. See it, name it, check it. Those are 3 steps that you can take. So the seeing it is the warning signs. What are the the facts of what you see? And when you name it, you can also name your concern. I'm concerned about you. I heard this. I saw that happen. And I'm worried about you. And then checking it is taking a step back so that you're not jumping to conclusions, you're not making judgments, you're not rushing in to solve the problem. You're really trying to open a space, open a door for things, for people to talk with you, or just to hear that they are concerned about you.
So Neighbors, Friends, and Families has always included the idea that we need to talk to men who are using abusive behavior, or anybody who's using abusive behavior, for that matter. We want you to be able to do this safely. Many times we hear the message, well, I might make things worse. What we know is that if we do nothing, things will get worse. And what we also know is that most of us, if not all of us, we're already talking to people who use abusive relationship or abusive behavior in their relationships. We're just not talking about that. We're avoiding the problem. And so what we're suggesting is that we learn how to have, again, very simple, very straightforward, safe conversations with people we care about who might be behaving abusively. And so this Neighbors, Friends, and Families brochure outlines some simple tips and steps on how you can do that.
We always want to hold people accountable for their behavior, but we also want to say that behavior change is possible, and that the majority of people with support and treatment can make other choices. And so figuring out how to engage everyone in the issue, how to reduce the risks of domestic violence, both for the person who's committing it as well, and engaging them in keeping their family safe.
So another key message is just, it's not your responsibility to solve the problem. Whether or not you're connected with the survivor or with the perpetrator in the situation, you don't have to solve it, but you can open a conversation, you can open space, and then in that space, you can let them know help is available and help to connect them.
So warning signs can show up at work too. And we have a little montage here of some of the stories that we tell in workplaces about domestic violence.
But many of your coworkers have brought forth valid complaints about you not pulling your weight around here, and that is a problem.
Hey! What happened there?
Oh, I fell. Yeah, it was several calls, actually. He was pretty unhappy the last call. Angry, actually.
Your last on-board service evaluation isn't much better than the one before. You're still late for pre-flight briefings, if you show up at all. And there are issues with your uniform.
So that was just a very brief overview of some red flags that might arise in the workplace. We are really seeing significant changes across Canada. And we are building our understanding that domestic violence is indeed a problem that impacts the workplace. And we are building our understanding that employers can act to prevent domestic violence and to respond to it at work. So Ontario was the very first jurisdiction that I know of globally to bring in occupational health and safety legislation that specifically recognized domestic violence as a workplace hazard. And with that came responsibilities for employers to prevent and to respond to it when it shows up. Much more recently, January 2021, the Canada Labour Code had made changes to violence and harassment. And again, domestic violence is recognized as a form of workplace violence. And from that, follow responsibilities for employers. So along with that, the federal government has invested quite significantly in providing training and resources for employers, unions, and even workers too. You might want to check out our other website, www.domesticviolence, dvatwork.ca. The most common red flag for experiencing domestic violence at work are work-related difficulties. And so this might be an absenteeism or lateness, someone having trouble concentrating, not meeting deadlines, not being able to make important decisions, might be requested for getting off early, leaving early, taking days off on very short notice, asking for changes to the schedule. All of these red flags could have other reasons. It doesn't mean automatically that somebody's experiencing domestic violence. So when Margaret was talking about our see it, name it, check it framework, the idea is that we don't jump to conclusions. But when we see these happening, it is an occasion to have a conversation with someone and to, first of all, be very clear about what we're seeing, ask them if they're okay. And when that is supported by workplace policies that provide supports for workers experiencing domestic violence, we're again opening space in our workplaces, first to have these conversations, and secondly, to problem solve and to keep people safe while they're at work.
So these are, this is also from the Death Review Committee reports, and an understanding that there are indications when situations are increasing in risk for lethality. And the most common indicators is on the left of the screen. And what we know is that in the vast majority of cases, there are multiple indications of escalating risk, and that paying attention to risk factors is an important part of being able to respond to sort of the dynamic risk that's happening in the situation as it's occurring. This is our last little scenario that we're going to show that focuses on risk.
If you learn that someone is experiencing domestic violence, you might see signs of high risk. High risk means that there is a greater chance that someone will be seriously injured or even killed. There is cause for concern if the partner using abusive behavior has threatened to harm or kill the person you are concerned about or their children, and says things like, "If I can't have you, no one will," has choked them or hit them in the head or done something else that could have led to serious injury or death, watches them, listens to their telephone conversations, reads their emails, or follows them, thinks that they are seeing someone else and that they are very jealous. Risk also increases if the person using abusive behavior has threatened to kill themselves, has access to weapons, is going through major life changes such as job loss, separation, or depression, has trouble keeping a job, takes drugs, or drinks every day. And risk is higher if the person you are concerned about has just left or is planning to leave, fears for their life and for their children's safety, or they cannot see their risk, are in a custody battle, or they have children from a previous relationship. Things like being isolated without friends or family, or facing other obstacles like not speaking English, not being a legal resident of Canada, living in a remote area, all contribute to the risk of being seriously injured or killed. A safety plan can keep someone safe when they are in a high-risk situation. Police can help with safety planning, or if the person you are concerned about doesn't want to go to the police, a women's shelter can help with a safety plan. Find the women's shelter near you at www.sheltersafe.ca.
So I just want to acknowledge that I know we have some questions in the chat, and we will absolutely take time at the end of this to try and address your questions and have some discussion. So when we see these signs of high risk, when we see these warning signs, our next step is to make sure that there's a safety plan in place. Ideally, we'll be able to connect the person we're concerned about with a women's shelter if they're willing, and not all women are. If they're willing, they can go to police, and police will help with a safety plan. But women's shelters, this is their core expertise. They can help to do a safety plan. And so when I said, what we're doing is not trying to solve the problem, what we're trying to do is decrease people's isolation so they're not trying to figure out all of this on their own, so that they have knowledgeable, supportive people around them that can look at the circumstances of their life and build from there for safety, for the survivor, and oftentimes for their children if they have children as well. That's our final message of the campaign, is that help and support is available. It's available across the province. And so we've created our final little Neighbours, Friends and Families video to reinforce that message.
Neighbors, friends, family members, and coworkers are often the first ones to know that a personal relationship is abusive. But stopping domestic violence is a big problem. As someone who cares, you can open a conversation. There are experts in the community who can support the individual you are worried about. Your local women's shelter is always a good place to start when you're looking for help. They will have a 24/7 crisis line. They can tell you about the network of services and supports for people experiencing domestic violence that are available in your community. Some organizations will work with people behaving abusively if they want to change. You can ask about that too. We know that people of all genders experience domestic violence. The Neighbours, Friends and Families website can help you find help. Visit them online. Remember, we are in this together.
So we will put a link in the chat to the I Need Help page on Neighbours, Friends and Families. And as I said, if you're a man, if you're a trans person or a non-binary person, and you don't feel like a women's shelter is someplace that you want to go, there are other sources of support, and we will link to those through the Neighbours, Friends and Families website. So the final thing that we want to say is that we are in this together. We think that we don't have to be an expert to be able to start to address this problem. And in fact, we've gained a lot of expertise through the years. Shelter workers, police, healthcare workers, very, very good at responding. What happens is, because it's the people in the immediate social circles of survivors and of perpetrators of domestic violence that know what's happening, not necessarily the professionals. So there's this big gap that we all have to try and fill by being attentive to the people around us. Margaret, did you want to say something?
No, I think that, sort of this idea that the journey that we're on it's the right journey, how do we get to prevention? How do we engage everyone in the issue? How do we extend, create the kind of society that we want to live in that is just and supportive and safe for everyone? These are the places that I want to put my life energy into. And I am so privileged to be here today on International Women's Day with all of you, because being with you just reminds me, of how many people care about these issues and are willing to take even small steps to make a difference. And so how we support each other on this journey, for me, is really at the heart of it. So I wanted to say also, this is the end of the presentation, so I'll stop the share, but I just wanted to say thank you for all of you who have come today for what you do.
Yeah, thanks, Margaret. So I'm looking at some of the questions in the chat, and somebody says, what can Black Indigenous women who don't call 911 do? They don't call 911 because of historical and present bad experiences with police. Are they left out of support? And this person saying, sadly, shelters are problematic and not seen as an option. And so this is what I was talking about when I said we have to have an intersectional analysis of the problem and understand that certain people in certain communities do face additional barriers. So I would say that the answer to that question is a little bit dependent on where you live, because each community will have different sources of support. I'm not sure where the person asking the question is coming from, but I would suggest look first to the organizations that specifically provide support for Indigenous women and for Black women. And they may well be doing work around domestic violence. So for the Indigenous communities in Ontario, the Ontario Federation of Indian Friendship Centers is doing a tremendous amount of work on this problem. We put at the beginning the website Ganawaytulin. You can go there and they'll have lots of links and lots of information. Ontario has actually a whole domestic violence action plan for Indigenous women. So a great deal of work is being done with Indigenous women specifically. I think less work is being done with Black women. So that's obviously a direction that we need to think about and that we need to move in the future. For immigrant women, there is the Neighbours, Friends and Families for Immigrant Communities website, which would have some information. So those are some places to start. And I'm sorry, we don't have all the answers and we don't have all the resources that are needed. I absolutely acknowledge that. I think there were more questions. Let me see if I can see in my chat here. We have another question about domestic violence in different economic situations. So we do have research that links poverty and domestic violence. And we know that poverty is an exacerbating risk factor to experience domestic violence. At the same time, we know that women from absolutely any social location, you can be a very successful professional woman, you can have a very secure financial background and still experience domestic violence. And many women who are professionals are actually speaking out about this. And so we don't want to leave the impression that this is only a problem for any one particular group in our society. We know that that is not true. At the same time, we need to recognize that women who live in poverty are going to experience additional challenges and additional barriers, and in our responses. So those of us who are doing research or providing services need to both acknowledge that, pay attention to it in our work.
So Barb, there's a few questions in the Q&A.
Okay.
So the first question was, working with women of domestic violence, how can we best support women who do not want to access a shelter so that they're not isolated?
Okay.
And that's really, you know, that's at the heart of Neighbours, Friends and Families, right? It's the people around. So giving people what they need to be able to be supportive, no matter what she decides, where she wants to, what kind of services she might want to reach out to. Having people around who care about her, who see what's happening is meaningful.
Yeah, I would say that the key is to build a relationship of trust. And so if you're somebody that a survivor trusts, that relationship, it may be her lifeline. And somebody who doesn't want to access a shelter right now, if you're able to continuously build trust with that person, if you're able to find out who are the shelter workers, what can the shelter provide, what will happen if she reaches out to them, eventually that person may be more willing to get support from the shelter. There may also be other services that she can support in your community. There may be generic counseling services that would be appropriate. There may be specialized counseling services that would be appropriate. There may be specific ethno-specific services that would be helpful and supportive. So if you're the person that a survivor trusts, and you have time to do a little bit of research and a little bit of homework and bring that information in digestible pieces as the person's ready to hear it and to accept it, then you can maybe work to gradually connect them someplace that can offer a little bit of support.
So our next question, if you became aware of a neighbor or woman you didn't know who was experiencing domestic violence, are you saying naming it, that the violence or harm should be addressed in the first interaction? And I would say that's no, not automatically. See it, name it, check it is really, it's a framework. You have to decide sort of what's appropriate in the moment, but it is a nod to this idea about naming what we're seeing, but you can also just name your concern. And the thing about Neighbours, Friends and Families is we're trading on existing relationships. So of course, if it's someone you don't know very well, you're going to be a little more slow into the conversation than if it's somebody you know. You know, what we're saying is that it's the people around the family are have the sort of the most visible look at what's happening. They're also the best position to make decisions about how to have the conversation. And, naming warning signs can be like a lever that opens the door, right? I saw this happen. I'm concerned about you. Can we talk about it? It's really just, it's not about trying to rescue or solve. It really is about opening that door.
Yeah, it's about watching for the opportunities to open the conversation. So if it's a neighbor that you really don't know, if you can start to, just say hello, build a little bit of trust, and then build up to being able to say, are you okay? I heard something, I saw something, are you okay? And then, probably people, when you first say these things, are probably going to deny it. And don't be surprised by that. And don't think that that's the end of it. Every warning sign is a new opportunity to return to those really very simple questions. And if you're trying to build trust in a relationship, of course, you don't only want to be looking for warning signs. So, opportunities to connect around any interest that you might have in common is always a good idea. Have we got all the questions in the chat, Margaret?
Yeah, no, well, they're not in the chat, they're in the Q&A.
Yeah, I'm watching the chat, you can watch the Q&A.
Okay, that's good, Barb. See, this is why we travel together, is we can only do so much. Are the videos shareable? Can we post them to our intranet safety page, or what steps would we need to take to be able to show them all more widely within our workforce?
Okay, so yeah, definitely are shareable. So we are you've got a little bit of a preview of the whole series of videos. We're going to be releasing them over the month of March on our CREVAWC social media and through the Neighbours, Friends and Families website. And so today we're releasing the second one. So the two videos that are currently out for public distribution, we welcome, we thank you for sharing those, for using those. So you can get access to them either through the Neighbours, Friends and Families social media or through the website. So go to our website. And if you have any problems, if you don't have what you need there, on the Neighbours, Friends and Families website, there's a contact us. Just send us a quick email and we will help you to get access to the videos so that you can share them. Related to that, we have questions about accessing this webinar again. I believe it's being recorded and we will definitely post it so you can access it again. And there was another question too. Somebody wants in a follow-up email information about the resources for the workplace website. So we will also send you that as a follow-up.
So there was another question. What information is available via NFF to multidisciplinary healthcare professionals? Not many were trained in recognizing abuse in undergrad. That's a bigger conversation.
Sorry.
So, yeah, go ahead, Barb.
Sorry, I was reading the chat. Could you
Oh, you want me to read it again? So what information is available via NFF to multidisciplinary healthcare professionals? Not many were trained in recognizing abuse in undergrad.
That's very true. So one thing I would say, there is a webinar. If you go to the Neighbours, Friends and Families in past webinars, we have one that was done by a dentist, a forensic dentist. Very good, very helpful if you happen to be a dental in the dental field. I would say that our information is helpful. It's helpful if you're a nurse. It's helpful if you're a personal support worker. Take those very simple messages as a starting place. And then there is actually quite a bit of information available for healthcare workers that's more focused on your profession. But that doesn't mean that starting out with these most basic of messages isn't useful. It is very useful. And if you end up wanting to pass information along to somebody you're concerned about, you don't want to pass them along something that's intended for a nurse. You want to pass them along, something from the Neighbours, Friends and Families website. So I would say start with our website. We have a lot. We have past blogs, we have webinars, the brochures are posted there. There's some briefs, all of that. Pick and choose what's helpful, and then honestly, with a Google search, you'll turn up all kinds of information that's more specific to the individual healthcare professional fields.
But it is part of our mission, right? This is part of the big picture. Is how the issue will change when people across all sectors, all communities, are able to recognize warning signs, understand what they mean, respond sort of safely and effectively, and to know where to find help in the community.
Yeah. So one place that healthcare professionals can look for guidance and support is the VEGA, VEGA website. That was a years-long project involving healthcare professionals from many, many different fields and disciplines. So check out VEGA, VEGA.
I think the Equip Healthcare, does it also go into domestic violence? I think it's another it's trauma and violence informed, but I think they also have content on domestic violence for healthcare professionals.
Yeah, it's worth checking there as well. Yeah. More questions?
I think that's it. So the question about sharing, so I think you've answered that.
Yeah, you feel free to share anything that we've presented, any of the resources on our website, feel free. If you want to take them and adapt them for your own purposes, that's okay too. We just ask that you email and ask permission. And that's essentially so that we can have a little bit of an idea about where the resources go in the world. But we never deny you permission to use anything.
So I think that we're at the end then.
Yeah, so we will send you a little follow-up message with some links that you've been asking for in the chats. I want to thank you again for your time today, for your interest. You're part of our message that we're all in this together and that everybody has a role to play.
Thank you.
Thank you.